there was a question that came in how I hold my pencil, and I hold it like this, just like this. I'm a lefty, so I hold it like that. And in the sketchbook, I sketch like this, and I try not to, every once in a while I have to get in and do a highlight on an eye or something, but I try and relax it out. So I'm working not from the little fingers, but from the whole hand or even from the shoulder and sketching through. So there's more energy in the stroke. So that's how I hold it. That's very different than if I'm working from a model on bond paper or tone paper from life, where I've got charcoal, I've got my 19 by 24 board and pad, the model's up on the stage. Then I will hold it like this. And same with painting. When I'm painting, I hold it like this and work it in oil painting, because I'm working fairly big. With these smaller little studies, then it's a little more precise. You're working incrementally. And so I'll switch here and do like so. All right, so this just happens to be the sketchbook I brought. And I'll just overlap things, and oftentimes I'll overlap something I don't like. There's a little tree study here that was no great shake, so I put a little study over the top. That we're going to be doing this kind of thing a lot. We'll be doing all this a lot. This is actually an idea for a painting series that popped into my head when I was at an art conference. I was looking at some images that came up in a lecture that weren't like this, but had kind of brought that to mind. So I was thinking little figures down city streets with big, massive architectural shapes behind. So this is my gouache study, just working out basic value systems and working abstractly. You'll notice some of these are turned sideways, and I'll end up at times probably on these pages turning the whole sketchbook upside down. We've got it mounted here, so it's not as mobile, but I'll flip the book around to draw over here, because I don't want that ring binding in my way. And sometimes I'll even draw the whole book upside down, the whole page upside down, so I don't have to bump up against this.
Welcome to New Masters Academy, the best place to get art education online. Master the skills of drawing, painting, sculpture, illustration, and much more with the guidance from world-renowned artists. Embark on your creative journey today at nma.art.
Okay, little studies. This was actually on the airplane coming back from a conference. Did a few sketches from, I don't even remember where the images was. I think it was in the On-Flight magazine or something, and just kind of sketching around, playing with shapes and stuff. Little demonstration on master studies. I was talking about something, I don't remember. This is going to be what we're going to be doing here pretty quick. Here's the idea for a painting. It was actually recorded lessons for new masters. I'm going to do a painting demo. It's going to be a few months before it comes out, because I'm going to work wet over dry. And so each time I come into town for a workshop like this, I will do another pass on the painting. It will have dried for quite a while. I'll come back and work on it. This is the composition I'll be working on, not the teddy bear. That one. You can see how simply I'm working, and you can see the thinking here. What's the dynamics of shape here? Like here we have this thrusting V shape going that way, and then kind of a V for the head playing against it, and a V for or a series of V's for the hands going against it. So how can I play those ideas? And again, we'll talk about those things. Working out very, very simply, or working it out as a little kind of typical construction of 5 minutes or whatever it is. Playing several choices. And so the sketchbook allows us to work through possibilities and play and play and play. Another little study here of it, and over here too. Working out, shall I make the head tilt back away, tilt towards us a little bit, and more of a straight design? Should I play up, kind of mushroom out the hair, play the round against the straight maybe, start playing round shapes. So I'm always looking for shape design and how that plays with or contrasts against three-dimensional to two-dimensional or formed or linear or more organic to architectural, just playing those differences. Here's a little study of one of my little girls, and this is a property, a little chunk of our property actually in the morning mist before the sun came up. And these were from photos actually. So we'll do a lot of this kind of stuff this weekend. I'll show you how to do that, and it's great fun to do. Little study, I think that was for a class, I can't remember, it might have just been for me, and just working things out. And one of the things we find is when we sketch loosely and kind of ease into a solution, it may get a little clunky, it may not be as gracefully drawn as if we worked it out more carefully. But I'm not really concerned about that. What I'm looking for is surprises. So even little things like the lighter halftone or highlight wandering off the arm into the background. That kind of idea that what should be here is over here might give a sense of movement, like a flare on a photograph. If you see a photograph or a video, sometimes if the arm, the well-lit arm or whatever it is, the highlight on the ring moves, you get a trail of the highlight that has to catch up because that image gets an over image on it, and we get that trail there. And so those kind of things, or just a few little simple marks that are fairly crude, but that's probably my favorite part of the whole painting is that little hand. It's not near as carefully worked out and worked over as the torso, but it's a lot fresher and more interesting. And the shapes, although they have all sorts of realistic problems to them, they're energetic and interesting and are really suggestive. And so that does a lot of work without a lot of effort. And that means it's better designed in many senses, even though the realism may suffer. The energy and the character of things makes up for that. And then we can maybe try and take some of that and apply more careful construction to it if we want to be hard and fast realists. But I'm always looking for possibilities, and the sketchbook is the best place to do it. Notice how I built up slowly to the darker values. This became the darkest value, then it got darker, then it got darker, and as I changed the value, I kept changing my mind and changing the color. So you get these layers of color choices, one over the top, and I'll do much the same in the backgrounds and the shadows, which tend to be thinner in my paintings, but in my oil paint, I'll do much the same thing. This was actually, I did that last night for a Ask Me Anything session on Facebook and YouTube. So just a little study, just playing with shapes and ideas and doing a little rendering, and not great. It doesn't have a lot of energy. The shape design, the proportions aren't really intriguing, but it's a sketchbook, and so that's quite all right. And if I do something like this that I really hate, I'll come over here and do a little tonal structure, something like this, or even this, or this, over the top of it. And I can get rid of the embarrassing area, and that kind of layering of image, crowding and overwhelming image is intriguing. It looks like it's daring, that you're just going to keep trying on one page rather than being precious, and now we don't want to do anything else because we want to frame this. And I'll do another one over here. Go ahead and let them be a little less precious and let the whole page then have an energy and its own sense of kind of collaged composition to it. And again, the same kind of scatter shot, random placement here, it might inform how I place the trees somehow here, and letting that be, give the feel at least of accidental placement. Here is the color studies and tonal studies all in one for this same painting here. So this is all on camera, me doing this, and it won't be available, as I said, for a while, but eventually it will pop up. So I took this, all from photographic reference in this case. That's most what I do these days. I don't do a ton from life. I do some. And then I worked out, a typical kind of Brown School statement of it. What's it going to look like in terms of value? How dark do I make the background? How dark do I make the shadows? How light do I make the light? Give a sense of how much detail, variation of color and rendering of form, an indication of where the busy areas are going to be and where the simple areas are going to be. And then does it have to be one more, kind of Brown School with north light, studio light coming in, or typical spotlight setting it up, or can I push it into a nocturne? And that's what I chose to do. And notice as I go from one idea and then get a new idea or try and refine that idea, I'm refining the big picture, not the rendered detail. There'll be times for that where I'll come over, as I did here, and attempt, and it was just an attempt here, attempt to do something more rendered and more nuanced. And it will be successful or not, but even if I screw it up, at least I'm getting to know those forms a little bit, and I'll do it again and hopefully not screw it up, or I'll take that screw up as a lesson into my finish and say, okay, well, I've got to be a lot fresher with the color. I have to be more interested in the shapes. I can't be so fussy with the highlights. I need to maybe do something that moves the eye through the color of the cheek, neck, and chest. Maybe it gets too monotonous, so that pale yellow. And I make those corrections. But as I keep coming to new ideas or layers of revelation about what that painting can be or that image can be, I'll oftentimes get cruder. So there's just, that you wouldn't really know it was a figure if it wasn't in context to this. And that's quite all right, but it's really beautiful tonal landscape. I love how close in value these are as opposed to the typical separation there that is demanded by, say, a Rembrandt-style composition. Here it's much more smoky, a lot of lost and found, pushing the whole head back darker rather than just making everything light and shadow, light and shadow, light and shadow the same. Now I've pushed the head back into that murky space by making it go dark into the relative dark behind it. That's interesting to me. So choices, choices, choices. Here's just working out some ideas on the basic character of the body, basic difference between male and female, between a stable pose and an unstable pose, how we can push that into energy, how we can play with the proportions maybe of things, to play up one thing, play down the other, or how even in rather tight or traditional, not tight, but traditional realism, we can add a little bit of a caricature. This is a wild caricature, this is a wild caricature, this is more of a straight read. So can we find a balance between the two and maybe play up the hairstyle of it, or the face shape, playing great differences, a diamond shape as opposed to a rounder shape, and then the longer and a little more weathered shape. So, and then how does the hair frame that and play with or play against that? So my premise here is that every great realist is a little bit of a caricature artist, a little bit of a cartoonist. They'll overplay and underplay certain features, certain shapes for effect. So when you look at Sargent, those in a very real sense are caricatures of the person that stood before them. The neck is longer, the skin is tighter, the hair is fuller, the eye sockets are deeper, the nose isn't twisted off or broken, it's smoother and more aligned. And then we can look at basic characters, thin, how thin should thin be? How normal should normal be? What's the difference between a little bit older? Maybe we have more worried marks, more little details, kind of crowding and noisy on top of the big details. How voluptuous should we make a voluptuous figure or Rubenesque? And then heavier figures. Why can't we do, this is just as beautiful to me. That creates art of interest. It doesn't always have to be this classic ideal of beauty. It can be something very different. I mean, look at those incredible shapes to the head, the zigzagging of those features there, that bull neck pushing out, and this mass of torso, chest and shoulders below it. That's incredibly interesting. And it's different than the typical. This is usually what we go to draw. It's the young girl, it's the pretty woman, and we make sure we make her pretty, and she has a fairly ideal figure, and so we make sure we idealize it. We don't want to make her too fat, because she might be upset by that. We don't want to make the face asymmetrical. That might make her ugly. So we make these kind of little pinup drawings, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's so many more places to go, and those things you could explore in your sketchbook. And you may need to do this to sell your paintings. You may enjoy doing this more to sell your paintings, or to do your career, or to model the character for the company you're working for. And so you might do this most of the time. But we can explore all these other wonderful venues of melting forms that are pulling down with gravity, that melting wax idea. There's a big, broad world. And then taking what we see there and seeing if we can't push it into a direction, applying an emotion to it. So add an adjective. He is aggressive, or hungry, or ravenous. And what's he ravenous about? When we start doing that, it suggests a story. Not that I want the picture to tell a story, but I want to be motivated in the marks I make to reinforce some emotional truth, not just capture. There's times where we just want to capture it, but can I push things a little bit, push the overall design farther? And so just playing with these marks. How messy do I want to make the marks? Do I show that to show that she's windswept, she's outside with leaves of fall scattering across her and particles in the air, or she's windswept and it's more of a ragged line to show that this beautiful young woman is emotionally aged. She's had a tough life. And so there's a lot of scars going along with that, the idea of being attractive or whatever it is, and again, I wouldn't want to tell a story in my painting about that. That's for news feeds and that's for fiction novels. But I wanted things to have an iconic image or an iconic sense that it can be symbolic of. And then the audience can come into that, and maybe I'm not going to tell them what I just told you, but they may well feel it. And I may have done it for completely different purposes, but they'll read into it, and we allow it to be open. The sketchbook allows us then to be open as well and to try things. A confident mark as opposed to a hesitant series of marks, a starting and stopping with hesitancy, as opposed to a deep confidence and kind of attacking the form. That's going to say something very different in your work to your audience. So sketchbooks, working this out. I like this drawing, but that back side does not connect well with the front side. But I like the way I did this. So I come back here and do it again and correct there a little bit and say, well, where should that tummy and hip be compared to that arm and shoulder construction? Should be a little closer, should move this way. And just these kind of weird marks that are suggestive of the sacrum and the gluteal muscles as they compress against the ground. Those might be marks that I pick up in my shadows. I might do a brown wash shadow like a Sargent portrait or a Van Dyke painting, and then I might do these little drawn marks in there. I'm getting that from the sketchbook, from the freedom of it. This is not the best drawn hand, but I love that fluidity there. So I might come back in my rendering, my gouache rendering or my oil painting or my sculpture, and make sure that I do carefully control the proportions of the hand and the construction of the hand, but I also keep that fluid quality, as opposed to if I just block things out, they sit correctly, but they've lost a little bit of life. Here I'm going to make sure by referring back to my freer sketches that I begin with the life and then impose the structure back on top of it. And notice if I want something to be, let's see here, say skinny. How skinny is skinny? I can do a caricature of that, and I can thin all the forms out like I'm doing in the arms. But also I can pick a pose that maybe doesn't square off the shoulders so that we get the hourglass shape, because that starts that wider shoulder. It makes her waist nice and skinny, but it makes her look a little boyish, especially with the short hair. So maybe I need to stage her into a profile. And so figuring out the staging of something, exactly what am I going to do for a cropped in figure, kind of a bust shot and up of a figure or wherever, what's the best choice for that? The actual acting out. So if I want to say skinny, a iconic painting of a thin, skinny person, whether that's a positive or a negative, whatever commentary I want to put onto that, maybe this zigzagging and splayed pose is a much better way to say skinny. Then we have everything kind of as sticks going in different directions. And so that, it's almost like a praying mantis kind of thing going on here. So maybe then I'm going to be more careful in how much lumps and bumps, how many eggs, that kind of hourglass idea. How much of the egg quality I build into that torso. So there we go. Or just analyzing. A little more fluid, energetic line, a little more traditional. On and on and on. Just looking for types. Look at how that chest and that bent arm come into this wonderful V or conical shape. That's glorious to me. I love that imagery. Maybe we're going to pick that up again then, where we get the thighs coming into the knees, and then the calves coming into the ankles, and then the feet coming into the toes, maybe the hair straggling off the head. Maybe I'm going to use that as a thematic idea, a repetition throughout. So there we go. So that's the idea. I hope that excites you, because I get excited, frankly, just talking about it. It's just, to me, fun stuff. And it's underneath all the skill. We're going to talk a lot about skill sets here, starting here momentarily. But to me, as I spend more time in my career, it's less and less about that. And if you look at your favorite artists through history, I'm going to take a little sip here of my tea. If you look at your favorite artists, Rembrandt, Degas come to mind, many of them will get cruder and cruder and cruder and simpler and simpler and simpler as they get older and older and older. Tintoretto is a good example of that. Titian, his Pittura style, dab paint style that was kind of a precursor to Impressionist dabbing style, and Seurat's pointillism. But you look at those great artists, Michelangelo, and they got simpler and cruder in their technique. And the reason they did that, I think, is because they realized if you just are copying and capturing, trying to get control of the object in realism, then you're in great danger of making your art just about the object. Whatever that object is, you caught hold of it, you slapped it down onto the surface with whatever medium you chose to work with. And so now what? You can say, well, good job. That's a cylinder. I'm proud of you. You did a cylinder. But that's all it says. So what we find with this, a lot of our great talents through history is that they start to get cruder, make the mark making stronger. The actual strokes and marks start to overwhelm the realism. They start to separate out, and we're aware of the technique, like we are in a hatch, as opposed to grouping things more carefully so that we see the overall function of it. And the forms themselves get cruder, less gracefully designed, simpler, and oftentimes more distorted. And then all of a sudden, we can't just look at that object as an idealized beauty. It's no longer that classic beauty that so drives realism, and I understand that. I'm subject and victim to that too, and am rewarded by that. I get lots of good things from that. But if we just focus on that, we miss the poetry sometimes. So for we realists, the poetics are in danger because the realism is a reality program. It just gives you an edited version of a rather uninteresting and unimportant truth. You know, people trying to fish in dangerous waters or trying to be stars for 15 minutes or whatever it is. It's curious and it's titillating and it's kind of fun to sympathize or laugh at those characters, but it doesn't mean much. It doesn't make our lives principally better other than letting us escape them a little bit. It doesn't give us any wisdom to take with us or any real lasting relief. But great art, when it deals with the poetics of life, has a chance to do all those good things. It has a chance, and all the other things. It can be just fun to explore. It can be a great escape, but it also has the potential of being something much, much more. Is a little redesign of legs going to change the world? No. But within this little choice of how this goes together might be part of your greater vision for a painted series, a world-building series, and that's really what we're doing as artists, I think, is we're building worlds. Just like the Hollywood movies build them through digitally now. They used to build them construction. We're doing that too, and so we can then bring great meaning to that world if we're able. But it starts here. You know, in my world, what happens? How do we go from thigh to shin through a knee? Maybe it's just a really fun, you know, I love that little bit there. This is all shadow up here. This is going to be a eventually well-structured thigh, presumably, into a shin. But that idea of this really kind of cloud-like looping of compressed forms, and each one is its own personality before it takes off into this simplified, stiff curve, that's a wild series of relationships. Each of these little characters is different, and yet as a group, they're wildly distinct from this next character. That's a wonderful relationship. That's dramatic storytelling, where these are characters, this is a group of kids, and this is the challenge they face in the story. They all have a lot of similarities, but they face a fish out of water story where they're out of their element and they don't know how to move through it. That's great potential great drama there. And it's great drama at that little moment. Here's another variation of it. That's fun stuff. And those are inventions that we can take into our finish work and really distinguish ourselves rather than just the traditional, like that woman's head study I did. That was just straight trying to copy the realism, and it didn't really do much for us, didn't give us much. All right, I'll shut up before I start talking again about other things here.